People talk about grief like it's a rupture, a sudden crack that opens and swallows you whole. That's true sometimes. Other times, grief is less a rupture than a slow settling of dust. It gathers in the corners, on top of the piano, between the pages of books you meant to read. It lives in things you don't notice until the light hits them, and you realize they've always been there. I suppose that's how it starts for us, not with shouting or hospital beeps, but with a pattern that feels the same until one morning it doesn't. The table, for instance. For 35 years, I have set it the same way. 3 plates on either side. The gravy boat at the center, the chipped salt shaker that belonged to my mother on the left, the little ceramic rooster Ben insisted we buy on a college spring break once upon a time. I would lay the napkins folded the same way each week, tuck the silver under the fork the way my grandmother taught me, and when the sun slanted the right way in through the dining room window, the whole thing would look as if it had been waiting, patiently, calmly, for the family to return. Sunday is our ritual. It's what Thomas invented the week Lily was born, because he was mid-project and we both needed something we could sign up for and keep. "It'll keep us honest," he'd say, folding a napkin like a paper soldier. The kids come, or they don't. There are weddings and work trips and awful weather and 3 different kinds of indignation that can keep someone away. But the table is there as a promise. One night a week, we eat, and the world bends a little toward us. This morning, I wake early because ritual has a muscle memory that wakes you. The house smells like bread. As I put a pan on the stove and pull the roast from the refrigerator, I move with the practiced hands of someone who has done this 1,000 times and knows where the spoons live and how the gravy always lumps if you turn your back. The radio is murmuring in the other room. Thomas hums along, in a tone that is almost a sigh. He's been humming more lately, a tuneless thing he does when he is thinking. He stands at the window and watches the yard as if he's trying to memorize light on the swing the way collectors memorize a signature on a painting. When I come into the kitchen, he looks up and smiles the way he always does, when he wants to smooth a worry. An unchanged half-smile I know as well as my reflection. "Good morning," he says. Even with the gray threaded in at his temples and the slow way he reaches for the kettle, he still says it like he means you should feel it. "How are you?" I ask, because that's what we say on ordinary mornings. It's not the same as the important questions. The important ones look you straight in the face. They don't ask. I can tell him the important questions the way I can tell when the bread is still doughy by the heft of a loaf. Only this morning, I do not want to break a thing that for 30 years has been working well. "I'm fine," he says. "It's Sunday." He says it like a benediction, like an incantation that will hold the day together. By 3, the house begins to hold sound. Ben's old truck graveling up the drive, the clumsy tumble of his keys on the table, Lily's message that pops up on my phone, "Stuck in a meeting, be there soon." The same words, almost always, the same apology. Ben walks in carrying a mismatched bouquet he swears he grabbed from the roadside because there were no florists open. It's the sort of thing that would have annoyed Lily when she was 20, but now it makes me laugh. Ben reels with life in a way that's messy and warm. He squeezes past me at the stove for a hug, hands in flour, apron tied askew. He reaches for the gravy spoon like he was born to steal the first lick. Lily arrives later, exact as always, which is to say beautiful in a way I am not sure I used to notice, pragmatic in a way that gets her to places on time and keeps the refrigerator stocked with protein shakes. She's got the air of someone who has learned to manage the world through spreadsheets and decisions. The softness life sometimes requires doesn't come naturally to her. She kisses my cheek quickly, a business pause kind of affection that still makes my throat tighten. We sit, we talk about projects, about Ben's not quite regular gigs, about the neighbor's dog that got out again. Underneath the small talk, there is the usual friction. Lily's polite impatience with Ben's romantic irresponsibility, Ben's resigned amusement at Lily's dislike of small risks. I steer. That's my role, I think. The chosen mediator. I make a silly joke about the gravy, and we all laugh. And for a moment, the house tricks itself into familiarity. But it's in the little things that the wrongness creeps in. Thomas doesn't eat much. He lifts his fork carefully, pauses, and places it back down. There's a coldness to his hands I feel when I brush them under the table, and they don't return the squeeze I give like they used to. When Ben tells a stupid story, Thomas smiles the way someone does when they're remembering something and not hearing what's said aloud. His attention is divided, as if he's listening to two channels at once. When Lily comments on her firm's layoffs, he nods and says something small and buoying, the kind of sentiment he keeps for elbows against her shoulder when the world gets noisy. In his face, I read the work of someone keeping a weather map on the inside of his chest. It's a small thing when he clears his throat and excuses himself to the sink, and I notice it. And then later, when he goes to stand and someone else makes a joke and he doesn't answer, it becomes a pattern. I watch his eyes while he is talking to them as if he's holding their faces in his head. It seems important to him to remember the shape of Ben's laugh, the way Lily sucks a tooth down between her teeth when she's trying to think. He watches like he is saving these small things for a later date. After dessert, his favorite apple pie, the kids drift to the porch and we let them. They argue about the better way to grill a steak, then apologize to each other, as if that irons out years. The conversations slip toward old landmines. The argument about who was in the wrong with the investment we lost when Ben was 22, the night Lily accused Ben of selfishness after a summer of promises not kept. I feel the old currents pull, but this time I do not let them drag me into the undertow. I keep my hands busy, clear plates, run warm water over spoons. Thomas stands with me. He moves with intention, but slowly. His wrist wobbles. When his hand brushes mine, I feel a shock like static. Not in pain, but in someone trying to make sense of a world that feels smaller. "Tom," I say softly, once the kids are in the other room, their voices dimmed by couches and distance. "Are you all right?" "Fine," he says. "I am. Just a bit tired, Evie." There is an answer's rhythm to that sentence that doesn't question any further, a place he's always stopped before. And yet it sits wrong in my chest. His eyes are not the same as they were last year. They are not the eyes that used to come for me in the night if a nightmare would make me wake. They are the kind that look outward, an inventory, deciding what should be kept and what can be left behind. We agreed to sit for a while by the fire. The flames gutter and throw a soft light across his face. He hums something that sounds like Sinatra, but isn't. A fragmented memory of songs. He says, looking into the coals, "Sometimes I think about all the Sundays we had, how lucky we were to get them." It's a small, simple sentence, and in it there is more than gratitude. There's a finishing. He picks at his knuckles the way men do when they try not to cry. I put my head on his shoulder. It is the way the body remembers love, not in words, but in 100 minor movements that add up. The clock in the next room ticks offbeat, keeping time as it always has, as if nothing were changing. When the children leave, The house returns to the hush of an empty theater. A wind pushes at the porch light. He stands and puts a dish in the sink, moves like a man measuring his breath. Later, when he comes to bed, he is quiet. He says nothing of doctors or worries or anything heavy. He asks for the garden light to be left on because he likes how it makes the yard familiar at night. I lie awake for hours, listening to the house settle. I think of the way he watched Ben, as if trying to remember the sound of his laugh. I think of all the people who leave quietly, who don't make a scene because making a scene would make everything too real. I think of my own mother, who left us when I was 19, not the way people leave in movies, in a cry or a scandal, but leaving the small way an animal slips from the edge of your life and you can't say why you didn't stop it. People leave 100 ways. Sometimes they only leave by stopping the one thing that signaled they were there. The next morning, he rises with the sun and moves through the house in a slow, methodical way. The ritual never stops. He brews the coffee and leaves a pot for both of us. When I come downstairs, he has already set one cup for me at the peninsula, like a small altar. It is the same gesture he's made for years. But today, his hands tremble as he pours. He forces a joke about the weather and moves the paper aside and stares out the window a long time. If I reach for his hand, he touches it back, but with a hesitant gentleness that tells me he is hiding something. I do not ask him because questions are stones in our family, heavy, that sink your feet where you stand. I wait until a slow afternoon, when the soup is simmering and the children are at the market arguing over produce. He calls me into the study, where the light is softer, where the shelves hold books we've read together, and ones neither of us touched since Lily moved out. Eve. He doesn't use my full name unless his voice is trying to anchor something, or it's the marker before something important. The air in the room folds toward us the way a film's soundtrack might. He shifts in his chair as if measuring the weight of the sentence he must balance. I wanted to tell you, he says. There is no preamble that would make it lighter, only the sentence itself. What? My mouth is dry. A cord tightens across my sternum. He reaches for my hand. His fingers are colder than I thought possible. I've been to the doctor. I sit down. In that seat in the study, the room feels suddenly small as a truth box. Images cascade. Hospital corridors, letters, the way the sky looked the day my mother moved away with her suitcase. Tom, what is it? He inhales, slow and careful. There is a kind of performance in the breathing people prepare when they must put something heavy into the world. It's not good, he says. I've got something. It cannot be fixed. My brain provides a dizzying list of possible continuations, and only one of them matches his face. The one where everything ends. How long? I ask, the question slipping out because it is a way to create order in chaos. He closes his eyes for a second, then opens them. He said months, Evie. Maybe more, maybe less. His voice is small. He is wrong. The word months feels like a betrayal. Months aren't enough time to clean the attic, to tell your daughter you're proud, to ask Ben to stay for the summer and maybe patch the damn fence that always falls over when the wind comes from the east. Why didn't you tell me? My voice is a blend of accusation and sorrow that I cannot quite sort. I wanted... He stops. and looks at me with an expression I understand to be one of protection, a love so dense it had become armor. I wanted our Sundays to be mine, to be what we always dreamed of them being, not colored by pity. I couldn't stand the thought of you thinking of me as a thing to care for instead of your husband. You and the kids deserve dinners and jokes, not a calendar for visits. We've had enough of that. At first, I am furious. Who decides where worry goes, and who gets to shield whom? It's not his decision alone to take. But then I think of the way he watched Ben and Lily this weekend, as if he wanted to take one perfect version of them with him into something he could not control. I think of his mother whispering, before she died, that repentance is small if it is loud, that the quiet things measure our worth, the stoop of a shoulder in a doorway, the way you remember a laugh. We sit there for a long time. I curl my hand in his and try to think of a way to make a map of our remaining days so we don't trip over them. There is no map. There is only the choice to speak and make it real, or to wait and let the season fold its leaves. He asks me to promise him something. It is not a grand thing. Requests at the end are small. Tie my shoelaces for me when I get lazy. Play my records when I'm gone. He says, "Keep the Sundays, Evie. Continue them, please." His eyes are as bright as they ever were when he pleads for something childlike and dear. Of course, I tell him, it is not courage. It is a promise that will be heavy with the weight of what it means. But I will say yes because that is what we do. We gather, and when the world loosens its screws, we bolt ourselves together again. After he goes to his study and shuts the door, I make a list of things to do. It is absurd and ordinary. Call the caterer for the next month, check the guest chairs for wobbly legs, order new napkins in a quieter shade. The rituals we hold can be practical bandages against melancholy, and I will use them like a surgeon uses gauze. That afternoon, Ben decides to fix the fence after all, and Lily calls to say she'll take the kids to the park tomorrow so I can rest. There is a smallness to the domestic that feels like sanctuary. I go to the attic at sunset and pull up boxes of old photographs. There is a Polaroid of Thomas and me, with sand in our hair, and the chicken little and the sun so bright it was almost rude to stare. We were younger, somehow braver. We looked unstoppable then, because we were untroubled. That night, Thomas puts a small radio on the table by our bed and plays an old record. The needle catches and the sound slows, then steadies. A crackle like static that makes living sound warm and used. We listen. The room is full of the rhythm we are capable of keeping. Hands folded, a time to be quiet, and each other. He sleeps with his hand on my hip like children who find the easiest way to be near. No grand gestures, just the small pressure of a palm. Before sleep, he says very simply, "I love the way you set the table." It's who I am, I say and mean it. I mean the table, the patterns, the stubborn hope that carefully placed silverware can make the world resume its orbit. He turns his face toward mine and for once does not hide what he wears over his heart, the weariness. His eyes are wet. He says, "Promise me," again, like a child fishing for a promise. I promise, I say. I mean it with a kind of fierceness I didn't know I had until that moment. I sleep as if waiting for an earthquake, the way one sleeps with the knowledge of brokenness in the house. In the morning, the light falls exactly where it always has. The kettle whistles and the world seems to hold its breath with us.
There is an exquisite rotten quality to knowing how to keep a promise when time is short. You find yourself measuring corners you never thought to measure, counting plates like a rosary beads, savoring sentences, teaching patience. The smallness of the work becomes the work itself, the community of neighbors we invite to fill chairs when children can't come, the napkin rings we buy because they are pretty, the way we say grace even when it is hard to gather words. That is where we are entering the story, in the quiet stitchwork of domestic life. The chair across from me is never vacant for long. Sometimes it's filled with a friend, sometimes Ben, sometimes Lily, sometimes the neighbor's teenage boy who needs a meal. The life of the table expands beyond our family and into a constellation of small human debts, laughter for a bill, a shoulder for a cold night, a dish for a holiday. I do not yet know how the shape of our life will change. I only know the sensations that are in me, the weight in my chest when he looks at me, the suddenness of a tear when I find an old menu from a restaurant we used to go to, the way my hands remember the napkin's crease. I know the sound of his breath beside me in sleep. I know the promise I made. And so the ritual goes on. I set the table, we sit, and we try to be ordinary in an extraordinary way. We live between minutes that matter and minutes that do not. And in that liminal space, we learn to carry love like a secret lamp.
The day after that uneasy Sunday started like any other. Coffee, newspaper, the sound of birds fighting for crumbs outside our porch, but something about the quiet felt heavier than usual. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, the kind that listens back. Tonus was already in the kitchen when I came down, staring at nothing. His mug was empty, his plate untouched. He didn't even look up when I kissed his shoulder. "You didn't eat," I said softly. He gave me a small smile, that polite kind you offer to strangers in waiting rooms. "I will. Just wanted to sit a while." I nodded, even though I knew he wouldn't. He'd been saying, "I will," for weeks now. About breakfast, about calling his doctor, about fixing the leak in the porch roof. Each time, he'd pause halfway and lose his breath, as though the world demanded too much of him all at once. And each time, I pretended not to notice. I busied myself with the table, folding napkins, slicing bread that didn't need slicing yet. The knife trembled in my hand, not from weakness, but from the effort of pretending everything was fine. Pretending is exhausting work, especially when it's for someone you love. When the phone rang, I nearly jumped. It was Lily. "Mom, you sound tired." "Just early," I said, forcing a brightness that felt foreign. "Are you coming by tonight?" "Of course. Is Dad up for it?" "He's fine," I lied automatically. "Just resting more these days." A pause. Then her careful tone, the one she uses when she's trying not to step on emotional landmines. "Do you think we should, I don't know, see if he's okay?" "He says he's fine." "That's not an answer, Mom." "I know." We lingered in the silence that always came when neither of us knew how to talk about feelings. For someone so articulate in her professional life, Lily had never quite learned the language of family tenderness. Her sentences at home came wrapped in logic, never emotion. "She'll bring dessert," she said finally, retreating to practicality. "Something sweet. Maybe that'll get him to eat." "That would be nice. Drive safe." When I hung up, Thomas was watching me. His eyes were gentle, tired. "You could have told her," he murmured. "Tell her what?" "You know." I swallowed. "It's not my place to tell her something I don't know." He looked down. "Fair enough." But the air between us said everything unsaid. By 3, the smell of chicken roasting filled the house.
Cooking always steadied me. It was proof that some things could still be controlled. The rhythm of stirring, chopping, tasting. Each motion was a small rebellion against the chaos I felt building inside. Outside, the light was gray, one of those still afternoons when clouds sit low, like they're eavesdropping. Thomas sat by the window, reading the same page of the newspaper for nearly an hour. I pretended not to notice, but I did. Every time he turned the page, I saw his hand tremble, just slightly, enough to make me wonder how much longer we had before even that small defiance slipped away. At 5, Ben's car rumbled up the drive, that old beat-up sedan that coughed more than it ran. He came in whistling, hair damp from the drizzle, eyes bright with some restless energy. "Hey, Ma," he said, dropping his jacket over a chair. "Brought a bottle of wine. Not expensive, but red enough to look classy." I smiled despite myself. "You always bring the same one." He said, "Consistency is a virtue," kissing my cheek. Then he looked around, his expression dimming. "Where's Dad?" "Inside," I said, "resting." Ben nodded, but I could see the worry flicker across his face, the same worry I'd seen in the mirror lately. He poured himself a glass and took a sip. "You sure he's okay?" "Just tired." "Mom, I'm saying that for months." I stopped stirring the sauce. "What do you want me to say, Ben?" He hesitated. "The truth." "The truth," I said, turning off the stove, "is that your father doesn't want us treating him like a patient." He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "And when does it stop being his choice?" Before I could answer, the sound of a car outside saved us. Lily's. She stepped out, coat pristine, umbrella snapping shut with surgical precision. Always composed, my daughter, like life was a meeting she was perpetually 5 minutes late to but never unprepared for. When she came inside, she smelled like perfume and rain. "Hey, Mom," she said, handing me a pastry box. "I brought that tart from Green and Bloom. Dad loves it." "Thank you, sweetheart." She looked around, eyes scanning the familiar living room as though expecting something new to be broken. "Where's Ben?" "He's in the kitchen," I said. She smiled thinly. "Ah, drinking already." "Don't start," I warned gently. Too late. Ben appeared with his glass, grinning. "Hello to you too, Miss Perfect." "Still unemployed?" She shot back. "Still judgmental? Still allergic to adulthood? Still—" "Enough," I said firmly. My voice surprised even me. They both froze, sheepish, like they were children again caught fighting over toys. Lily sighed. "Sorry, Mum." Ben muttered sorry, but it sounded more like a truce than repentance. Thomas came out then, slow and quiet, his presence diffusing the tension the way sunlight softens a storm. He smiled at them both, that calm, fatherly smile that made everything seem smaller, less urgent. "You too," he said, shaking his head. "If I close my eyes, it's 1999 again." Ben laughed. "You mean when Lily tried to sell me lemonade and charged extra for ice?" "It was premium service," Lily said, deadpan. We all laughed then, real laughter, the kind that momentarily stitched the cracks shut. Thomas sat down, motioning us to join him. "Come on, before your mother's roast gets cold." It was almost like every other Sunday dinner. Almost. The same dishes, the same jokes, the same stories about how Lily once cut her own hair before prom, or how Ben fell asleep during his graduation ceremony. But underneath, something pulsed differently, slower, heavier. Thomas ate little. He picked at his food, smiling when spoken to, but fading out of conversations like a radio losing a signal. I kept catching him looking around the table, eyes lingering on each of us, as if he were trying to memorize us in order. Lily noticed too. She leaned in. "Dad, are you feeling okay?" He blinked, surprised by her directness. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "You don't look fine." Ben nodded. "Yeah, you've been pale, Dad. You working too hard?" "At retirement? I wish." The humor didn't stick. Lily put her fork down. Is there something we should know? I felt my pulse quicken. Thomas looked at me before answering. That tiny glance, just a second, said everything. It was a conversation of its own, silent but loud enough for me to hear. Not yet. Please. He smiled gently. No secrets, Lily, just a bit tired. Getting old is all. Old doesn't look like this, Ben said quietly. The table fell into silence. Even the clock in the hallway seemed to stop ticking. I reached for Thomas's hand under the table. His fingers were cool, but steady. I squeezed once. He squeezed back, reassuring but final somehow. Eat, he said softly. We're together. That's all that matters. And somehow, that sentence hurt more than anything else he could have said. The rest of dinner passed like a fragile performance, everyone pretending to act in a play they'd rehearsed all their lives. Lily talked about her firm's new project, words falling like pebbles into an empty well. Ben chimed in with half-hearted jokes. I smiled at all the right moments, refilled glasses that didn't need refilling, and tried to ignore the tremor in Thomas's hand each time he reached for his napkin. When the plates were cleared, I brought out Lily's tart. She'd chosen lemon, his favorite. Or it used to be. Thomas smiled faintly. You remembered. Of course I did. You used to steal my slice when I was a kid. That's because yours always looked bigger, he said. And for a moment, his voice had that old warmth again, the soft mischief that once filled our home. Ben leaned back, grinning. You too and your sweet tooth. I swear sugar is the only addiction this family approves of. Speak for yourself, Lily muttered, taking a sip of wine. Ah, right. Caffeine, Ben teased. She rolled her eyes. Productivity fuel. Thomas chuckled. You both haven't changed a bit. But then he coughed. Just once, but hard enough that it silenced the table. The sound tore through the room, deep, raw, metallic. He waved it off quickly, but the damage was done. Lily's face paled. Dad. I'm fine, he said between breaths, his voice rough. Just swallowed wrong. I stood to get him water, but he shook his head. Please, sit. We all did, though none of us touched our plates again. It was raining by then. Soft, steady rain that blurred the garden lights. The house smelled like thyme and coffee, the kind of scent that used to mean home, but now felt like a memory trying to linger. Ben helped me wash the dishes while Lily made tea. Thomas sat by the fire, watching the rain trail down the window. He looked smaller somehow, like the chair had grown around him. Mom, Ben said quietly as he rinsed a plate. Something's wrong, isn't it? I didn't answer. I've seen him tired before, but this is different. He's not just tired, he's thinning. I set a dish down too hard. It cracked. Don't say that, I whispered. Why not? Because if I say it too, it becomes real. He exhaled, leaning on the counter. You can't hold it off by pretending. I turned to him, eyes stinging. And what would you have me do? March over there and tell your sister that her father might be dying? The word slipped out before I could stop it. Dying. It echoed in the room like a curse. He froze. What do you mean, might be? I covered my mouth, but it was too late. He stared at me, eyes widening. He is, isn't he? Before I could answer, Lily's voice came from behind us. What did you just say? She stood in the doorway, holding the teapot like a weapon. Lily, what did you say, Mom? Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with anger. Nothing, I said quickly. It's just... She set the pot down sharply. Don't lie to me. Thomas's voice came from the other room, soft but clear. Evelyn, it's all right. I turned. He was standing there, one hand on the doorway, pale but composed. They deserved to know. Lily's eyes filled instantly. Know what? Thomas smiled gently. That I've had better years. Dad, she said, stepping closer. What does that mean? It means, he settled into a chair, that I've been sick for some time. The silence that followed was unbearable.
He told them slowly, carefully, like unwrapping something fragile. How he'd been diagnosed months ago. How he hadn't told them because he didn't want to be the center of sorrow. It's cancer, he said finally. Lung. It's advanced. Lily covered her mouth. Ben sank into a chair. I stared at my hands because I couldn't look at him or them without feeling like I'd betrayed everyone. Advanced? Ben repeated. What does that even mean? Thomas hesitated. It means there's not much they can do now. Just comfort. Time. How long? Lily's voice cracked on the word. He didn't answer. Dad, how long? He looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside me broke at the way his eyes softened. Maybe months, maybe less. She shook her head. No, this can't. You should have told us sooner. There are treatments, hospitals, trials. I've done all that, he said gently. It's not about fighting anymore. She turned to me then, voice rising. You knew, didn't you? He asked me not to. So you kept it from us? Lily, please. No, you let us sit here, laugh, eat, talk like nothing was happening? Ben stood suddenly, chair scraping back. Enough, Lily, yelling won't fix it. Don't you dare tell me how to feel, she snapped. You weren't even here half the time. He flinched. That's not fair. Fair? You think any of this is fair? Their words ricocheted around the room like stones. Thomas raised his voice for the first time in months. Enough. The room froze. He breathed hard, then softer. This is exactly why I didn't want to tell you. I wanted one last Sunday without it becoming this. Lily's tears came then, soundless and relentless. Ben stood rigid, jaw clenched, eyes burning. Thomas looked between them, his voice trembling but steady. I didn't want your pity. I just wanted your company. And then he stood, shakily, and walked toward the window. The rain had stopped. The world outside was washed clean, glistening under the porch light. No one spoke for a long time. The air was thick, grief too new to name. Lily finally broke it, voice barely audible. What are we supposed to do now? Thomas turned to her. Live. Keep having dinner. Keep laughing. Don't let this turn our home into a hospital. Ben nodded slowly, tears sliding down his face. Can we at least help be here? That, Thomas said softly, would mean the world. Lily knelt beside him, her hand trembling as it reached for his. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell. He touched her cheek. I know. You got that fire from me. She laughed through tears. Yes, I did. I stood watching them, my family, breaking and healing in the same breath, and for the first time that night, I felt something close to relief. The truth, painful as it was, had finally filled the room, and with it came a strange, steady calm. Later, after they'd gone to bed, I found Thomas in the study. He was sitting at his desk, writing. His handwriting, usually neat, wavered across the page. What are you doing? I asked softly.
He smiled without turning. Something I should have done long ago. I moved closer. Letters? He nodded. Just words, in case I run out of them sooner than I'd like. My throat tightened. To the kids? And to you. Especially to you. I wanted to tell him not to, that I didn't need words on paper. I needed him. But I knew better. This was his way of loving us, quietly, thoroughly, preparing us for what would come. So I kissed his head, whispered goodnight, and left him to it. That night, lying awake beside him, I watched his chest rise and fall, each breath fragile as glass. I thought of all the years we'd spend together, the arguments, the routines, the 1,000 tiny kindnesses we never thanked each other for. And I realized that love wasn't loud or grand. It was in the quiet gestures, the way he still reached for my hand in the dark, even when words failed. The house was silent, except for the faint scratching of his pen in the other room. A man writing his goodbye, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. And as the rain began again outside, soft and steady, I understood. This was not the end. It was the beginning of our letting go. Part 3. The Confession. The house was quiet again. That strange kind of silence that feels heavy, aware of itself. The kids had gone back to their homes in the city after a long, fragile breakfast the next morning. They promised to come back next weekend, to help, to stay more often. But the truth was, none of us knew how to move through this new reality. The morning after the revelation, I found Thomas sitting on the porch, wrapped in that old plaid blanket, staring at the garden as if memorizing it. The hydrangeas were in full bloom, his favorites. He used to prune them obsessively every spring, muttering about symmetry and soil acidity. Now they bloomed wild and uneven, like they'd grown defiant in his absence. "You should have told me," I said quietly, handing him his tea. He didn't look at me. I couldn't. Couldn't or wouldn't? He sighed. Both. The steam from the cup rose between us, blurring his face for a moment. I sat beside him, tucking my knees under the blanket too. The morning was cool and damp, the kind that seeps through your clothes and into your bones. I said, my voice trembling, "You let me plan dinners, fuss over grocery lists, talk about repainting the kitchen. You let me believe we still had time." He turned his head slightly. That was the point. I stared at him, confused and angry. "The point?" he said softly. "I wanted normal. Not months of hospitals, pity, or watching you crumble before I'm even gone. I wanted this, the sound of your cooking, the smell of coffee in the morning, you humming when you forget I can hear you." I looked away, blinking fast. "You're cruel, you know that." He smiled faintly. "I know." We sat in silence, birds chirping somewhere in the distance. A lawnmower buzzed 2 houses down. Life going on as usual, indifferent to ours. Finally, I said, "I'm angry at you." "He know. And I love you." He looked at me then, eyes glistening. "I know that too." The truth hung between us, raw and human, and impossible to hold for long.
That night, after he'd fallen asleep, I went into his study. The desk lamp still burned low, illuminating scattered papers, letters in various stages of completion. He was writing to everyone, to Lily, to Ben, even to his estranged brother whom we hadn't spoken to in 15 years. And then I found the one addressed to me. I didn't read it. Not yet. It felt wrong, like opening a gift before it was given. But seeing my name written in his shaky handwriting broke something open in me. All those years I'd accused him of being emotionally distant, of retreating behind that quiet wall. And yet here he was, pouring himself out in ink, knowing he wouldn't be around to speak the words aloud. I remembered a night from years ago,
one of our many quiet arguments. It was after Lily's graduation. We were sitting in the car, the air thick with unsaid things. "You never talk to me anymore," I'd said. "You answer everything like it's a checklist. Do you even feel anything, Thomas?" He looked out the window and said, "I feel everything. I just don't know what to do with it." At the time, I thought it was a cop-out. Now I understood. It was the truest thing he had ever said. The next week passed in slow motion. He still insisted on walking to the mailbox every morning, on feeding the birds, on pretending that each day was ordinary. I let him. Sometimes the illusion of normalcy is the only thread holding sanity together. But the children began visiting more often. Lily took over cooking, and Ben started helping with house repairs that didn't really need doing. They needed to do something to feel useful in the face of helplessness. One evening, I overheard Lily and Ben whispering in the kitchen. She was crying softly. "I just don't understand how he hid this. How could he not tell us?" Ben sighed. "You know, Dad, he'd rather die quietly than make a scene." "That's exactly what he's doing," she said bitterly. "Dying quietly." I stepped into the room then, unable to stay silent. "He's not doing it to hurt us, Lily." She looked at me, red eyes. "Then how does it feel like he is?" I didn't answer because I didn't know how to explain it, how to tell her that sometimes love isn't about inclusion, it's about protection. That her father wasn't hiding from them, he was hiding for them. That night, I found him in bed, looking at the ceiling. "You heard them," I said. He nodded. "They'll understand someday." "And if they don't?" He smiled faintly. "Then you'll tell them."
A few days later, something shifted. He called me into the study again, asked me to sit. I could tell from his face that whatever he was about to say would change everything. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. I waited. He looked down at his hands, at the deep veins that seemed to map out his life. "Do you remember that year I stayed late at work? The one you thought I was having an affair?" The air in the room thinned instantly. I remembered, too well. The fights, the cold dinners, the way I'd accused him, certain there was someone else. He met my eyes. "There wasn't another woman, but you were right about one thing. I was keeping something from you." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath and said, "It wasn't work. I was in therapy." I blinked. "Therapy?" He nodded. "I was having panic attacks, night terrors. I didn't know how to tell you. I was ashamed." "Why?" "Because men like me, fathers, husbands, we're taught to fix things, not to feel them. I thought if you knew, you'd see me as weak." I stared at him, stunned. All those years of tension, of emotional distance, I'd mistaken silence for indifference when it was really fear. "How long?" I asked softly. "A year, maybe more. It got better after we took that trip to Maine. I think being away from everything helped. I stopped the sessions, but I never told you because by then, not telling you had become its own habit." He looked at me, eyes heavy with regret. "I'm sorry for that." I felt something unravel inside me, a knot I didn't even know I'd been carrying. The lies, the distance, the resentment, they all trace back to this single truth. He'd been hurting, and I hadn't seen it. I reached across the desk, covering his hand with mine. "I thought you didn't love me anymore." He squeezed my hand weakly. "I thought you'd stop if I said the wrong thing." We both laughed then, softly, the kind of laugh that comes from realizing how absurdly human we all are. After that, things shifted between us. The air grew lighter, conversations easier.
We started revisiting the past like travelers comparing old maps, not to get lost again, but to understand how we'd found our way here. He confessed to small things too, the regrets that had haunted him. "I should have danced with you more," he said one night while watching an old movie. "Remember our wedding song? I still hum it sometimes." I smiled. "Then dance with me now." He hesitated. "I can't stand long." "Then we'll sit." So we did. His arms around me, the faint rhythm of his heartbeat against my ear, moving to a melody only we could hear. One morning, I woke to the sound of him struggling for air. He waved me off at first, but I called the doctor anyway. Pneumonia. His body was weaker now, every breath a battle. At the hospital, he grew restless, tugging at the sheets. "Take me home," he whispered. The doctor looked at me, and I nodded. That night, as I tucked him into his own bed, he whispered, "Promise me something. Anything. When it gets bad, don't let them see me like that." Tears welled in my eyes. "Thomas, please." I nodded, unable to speak. Then he said something that still echoes in me. "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving you behind unfinished." I whispered, "You're not unfinished. You're loved." He smiled. "Then that's enough." That night, I sat beside him as he slept. The house creaked with us, soft, fragile, alive. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel afraid, just grateful. Because even in endings, there can be peace, and in confession, there can be love. The days after Thomas's final hospital visit blurred together like rain on glass. Indistinct, trembling, hard to separate. He'd come home just as he wanted, and for a while we managed to pretend again. Pretend that the quiet in his chest was just sleep, not the body's slow surrender. But time, cruel and gentle all at once, has a way of stripping illusions bare. He passed on a Thursday morning. It was early, that hour before sunrise when the world still feels half-dreamed. The kettle was on the stove. I'd left it there and forgotten. The faint whistle woke me. I turned it off, scolding myself quietly for letting it boil over, and then I noticed the silence. It wasn't the kind of silence you notice. It was the kind that notices you back. The kind that fills a room after a lifetime of shared breath suddenly stops. When I turned, he was gone. Peaceful. Still. His hand rested on the blanket like it was reaching for something he saw beyond me. I sat there for a long time. Minutes, hours, I don't know. I didn't cry, not at first. Grief doesn't always rush in like a storm. Sometimes it waits at the edge of the room, patient, watching, giving you time to understand what you've lost before it takes over completely. It was Lily who found me. She'd come by early, bringing muffins and that determined look she wore when she was trying to fix the world. Her voice broke the quiet. "Mom?" Then softer, "Oh, God." I heard her sob before I felt anything myself. And that sound, that raw, animal sound, finally cracked me open. I took her hand, both of us shaking. "It's okay," I whispered, though it wasn't. "He's okay now." Ben came not long after. He didn't say a word when he saw his father. He just stood there, jaw tight, eyes glassy, fists clenched at his sides. Then he leaned down and kissed Thomas's forehead and left the room. That's how men in this family grieve. Quietly, destructively, in places no one can see.
The funeral was simple, just as he wanted. No church ceremony, no speeches, no flowers beyond what grew in our own garden. Lily arranged the table with wild hydrangeas and candles. Ben played an old recording of Thomas reading Frost. Nothing gold can stay. People came, neighbors, old friends, colleagues from decades past. Each one had a story, how he'd fixed their roof, lent them money, listened to them when no one else did. It was strange, hearing him spoken about in past tense, as if he'd become a collection of good deeds instead of a man. That night, after everyone left, I walked through the empty house, the echoes of laughter and condolences still clinging to the walls. The air smelled like wax and flowers, a combination I've never been able to forget since. I found myself in his study again. The lamp was still on, the desk was neat, unnaturally so. A few papers stacked together, a fountain pen resting beside them, and a small black voice recorder. For a moment, I couldn't move. I knew what it was even before I pressed play. "If you're hearing this," his voice began, steady, faintly amused, "then I guess Evelyn finally decided to tidy my desk." I laughed through tears. Even in death, he found a way to tease me. "Don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole dramatic farewell thing. This isn't about goodbye. I've spent enough of my life avoiding real conversations, and I won't let that be the last thing I do." The sound of his breath between words was soft, human, imperfect. It was like he was sitting right beside me again, alive in the air, not in memory. "I wanted to say thank you to all of you. Lily, for the way you kept this house alive even when I was half a ghost already. You always said I was quiet. Maybe I was. But silence doesn't mean emptiness. Sometimes it's just full of things I never learned to say out loud." I covered my mouth, tears streaming freely now. This was him. All the walls, the restraint, melting into something pure and final. To Lily, "I used to think your fire came from your mother, but I know now it came from both of us. You never let go, even when you should. That's your greatest flaw, and your greatest gift. Don't waste your love on being right. Use it to build something better." I could almost see her face, the way she'd cry hearing those words, the guilt softening into love again. "And Ben, you're more like me than you realize. You hide behind humor, behind fixing things that aren't broken. Let people see your heart sometimes, son. It's stronger than you think." His voice trembled slightly then, and I could tell he'd paused, fighting emotion even as he recorded this. "I don't want you to remember me as sick or frail. Remember the mornings, the coffee, the arguments on politics, the silly way I'd whistle off key. Remember the dinners, every Sunday dinner, because that was the point of it all. We thought we were just eating together, but really, we were learning how to love each other. Imperfectly, clumsily, but completely." I clutched the recorder to my chest. It was too much, too beautiful, too human, too final. "And Evelyn?" he said softly, almost whispering. "I saved you for last, because you've always been the first." My breath caught. "You were right. I should have danced with you more. I should have told you every day that you were the reason I could bear the silence. You made this house a home, this life a story worth living. I didn't deserve that kind of devotion, but you gave it anyway."
He chuckled faintly then, a sound like wind through leaves. That's all. I love you. Thank you for every Sunday. And the recording clicked off.
When Lily and Ben came over the next day, I played it for them. We sat around the dining table, the same one that had seen every fight, every laugh, every birthday and tear. At first, no one spoke. Lily just pressed her fingers to her lips, crying silently. Ben stared at the table, his hand trembling slightly. When the message ended, Lily whispered, "He really thought of everything, didn't he?" I nodded. That was him. Always thinking ahead, always fixing things. Even this. Ben exhaled slowly. He was trying to teach us how to live without him. Yes, I said, but more than that, how to remember him by living. Lily smiled through her tears. So we keep doing this? Every Sunday? I looked at her, and for the first time since that awful morning, I felt warmth again. Real, living warmth. Yes, every Sunday. The next Sunday, the house felt strange, too quiet, too big, but we cooked anyway. Lily made her father's favorite roast chicken, Ben brought his ridiculous playlist of jazz standards, and I set the table exactly as Thomas liked it. 2 candles, one slightly crooked. When we sat down, there was a moment when all of us instinctively looked toward his chair. It was empty, of course, but it didn't feel vacant. His presence lingered in the rhythm of the room, in the laughter, the smells, the stories. Lily poured the wine, her hand steady this time. To Dad. Ben raised his glass. To every Sunday. I lifted mine too. To love. The kind that doesn't end. We drank, we ate, we told stories, and somewhere between the laughter and the tears, I felt something settle inside me. A quiet understanding that grief isn't the opposite of love. It's its final, fiercest form. Because to mourn deeply means you've loved deeply. And love, once given, doesn't die. It simply changes shape. That night, after everyone left, I stood in the doorway of the dining room. The table still glowed faintly under the soft light. I imagined Thomas there, arms crossed, pretending to judge the cooking, eyes sparkling with that understated pride he could never say aloud. I whispered, "We did it, love. We kept the promise." A breeze stirred the curtains, just enough to make the candle flicker. And maybe it was just air, or maybe it was something else. But for a moment, I swear I heard it. His faint, familiar whistle, off-key as ever. I smiled through my tears. Because that's how love lingers. Not in ghosts or memories, but in the ordinary moments that refuse to fade.
A year later, the Sunday dinners continued, sometimes messy, sometimes loud, always full. Lily had her first child, and she named him Thomas. Ben started dating someone serious, a woman who laughed like she belonged in the family all along. The house remained the same. The garden still bloomed unevenly, wild and alive. Every now and then, I played that recording again, not out of sadness, but gratitude. To hear his voice steady and clear, reminding us all that life is built from the smallest, simplest acts: cooking, laughing, forgiving, showing up. And in those moments, I understood that his message was never about dying. It was about how to keep living. And that was the real inheritance he left us. It's been 3 years since Thomas's last Sunday dinner. 3 years since that morning when the kettle whistled and the silence answered back. And still, every Sunday,
At 5:30 sharp, the table is set. The same table he built with his own hands. The one that's seen everything. The spilled gravy, the slammed fists, the laughter that used to shake the windows. There are new scratches now, little dents where my grandson drags his toy cars across the wood. Thomas would have pretended to scold him, and then, when no one was looking, he'd join in. The first year was about holding on, the second, about learning to breathe again. But the third has been about understanding what it really means to live with absence. It's strange how the empty space someone leaves can still feel inhabited, like a chair that remembers its shape even when no one sits there anymore. The mornings are softer now. I used to wake up dreading the quiet, afraid it would swallow me whole. But lately, I find comfort in it. The way sunlight pools across the kitchen floor, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the house as it settles into another day. These sounds have become a kind of company. Every Sunday, I begin the same way. I grind the coffee, set the dough to rise, hum a tune I can never quite finish. It's not just routine anymore, it's ritual. The small act of doing something again and again until it becomes sacred. Sometimes I talk to him while I work. Did you see Lily's boy today? He's got your stubborn chin. Or, Ben finally fixed the leaky faucet properly this time. It's one-sided, of course, but the comfort it brings is real. Love doesn't vanish. It just changes address. By late afternoon, the house begins to fill again. It's always the same pattern. First Lily, then Ben, then whoever else has found their way into our orbit that week. There's always someone new now, a neighbor, a friend from work, a cousin passing through. It's become something larger than us, this dinner, a ritual that's outgrown grief, stretching into something communal, alive. When Lily walks in, she always carries too many bags. "Mom, you don't have to cook so much," she says, kissing my cheek before unloading enough food for an army. Her son, my grandson, runs straight to the living room, yelling, "Grandpa, I'm here," before remembering, in his small, serious way, that Grandpa is gone. Then he looks at me sheepish. He can still hear, right? I nod, smiling. He always could. Ben arrives next, with his new girlfriend, Emma. She's gentle, quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't fill space, but blends into it like a candlelight glow. She always brings dessert. Last week, lemon pie. This week, chocolate tart. Thomas would have adored her. They laugh, cook, argue, tease each other, and through it all, I just listen. Not as the matriarch overseeing things, but as a woman who finally understands that family is never finished. It keeps becoming. There was something Thomas never told me, at least not in words. A month after he passed, I discovered there were more recordings, not just the one message we all heard, but several, short ones, scattered across his notebooks and drawers. Some were unfinished thoughts, others were simply him rambling about books or the weather. But one I couldn't bring myself to listen to until recently. It was dated the week before he died. The label read, "For when the noise returns." Curious, I played it a few nights ago. "If you're hearing this," his voice said, warm and weary, "then the house must be alive again. That's good. That means you did it. You kept them close." He chuckled softly. "I worried, that after I left you'd all scatter like leaves in the wind. But you didn't. You stayed. That's what love does. It anchors us, even when we think we're adrift." There was a pause, and I could almost hear the smile in his voice. "Evelyn, I don't know what the world looks like without me in it, but I hope it's full of noise. Laughter, music, clinking plates. Don't chase silence, love. It's not peace, it's absence. Fill it, every day. The tape clicked off. I sat there for a long time, letting his words settle like dust in sunlight. I realized then that these dinners, the noise, the laughter, was his final wish. Not for us to remember him in sadness, but to outgrow it. So I decided we'd make it bigger. It started small, inviting a neighbor who'd lost her husband, a single father from church, an old friend who'd grown distant. People came, hesitant at first, unsure if they were intruding on something private. But the table grew, and with it, the laughter, the chaos, the noise Thomas asked for. Soon the Sunday dinners weren't just family, they were community. Widows, college students, new parents, strangers who became regulars. They came not for the food, but for the feeling, that fragile golden warmth that only exists when people gather without judgment. One Sunday, I looked around the crowded table, Lily feeding her son, Ben telling stories, Emma laughing until she cried, and realized something. The house was louder than it had ever been, and yet somehow more peaceful. Grief had not disappeared. It had simply been transformed from something heavy into something that holds.
After dinner one evening, when everyone else had gone, Ben stayed behind. He was standing by the back door, hands in his pockets, staring at the garden. It was almost midnight, the sky deep blue, the air carrying that faint smell of rain. "Mom," he said finally, "I listened to Dad's message again, the first one." I nodded. "I do that too." He smiled faintly. "He told me to stop hiding behind jokes. It took me a while to understand what that meant." He turned toward me, eyes glistening. "I think I used to be angry at him for not being, I don't know, more emotional. But now I get it. That was his way, and maybe that's okay." I reached for his hand. "It is." He squeezed back. "You know, Emma wants to move in. I was scared to tell you, afraid you'd think I was replacing Dad somehow." I laughed softly. "Oh, sweetheart, love doesn't replace, it expands." He leaned his forehead against mine, the way he used to as a little boy. For the first time, I saw him not as the son I raised, but as the man his father helped shape. And in that quiet, I felt Thomas again, not as memory, but as presence, still teaching, still loving, still here. A few weeks later, Lily stayed late after dinner too. Her son had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching one of Thomas's old flannel shirts, the one he used to wear when pruning the garden. She sat across from me, tracing circles on the table. "Mom, I think I understand why Dad never told us he was sick." I looked up. He wanted us to see him as living, not dying, to remember him as part of our life, not the end of it. She smiled faintly. "I used to be angry. I thought it was selfish, but now, maybe it was his last gift." It was. He gave us time, without letting it be shadowed by goodbye. Lily nodded. "I'm glad I had that time, even if I didn't know it was borrowed." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you, Mom, for keeping this going, for keeping him here." I squeezed her fingers gently. "No, my love, you did that. Every time you come back." Sometimes, late at night after everyone leaves, I walk through the quiet house, the same way I did after his funeral, but it feels different now. Back then, the silence was suffocating. Now it feels like a breath. I'll see the dishes piled high, crumbs scattered, a chair slightly askew, and I'll smile. This, I think, is what happiness really looks like. Not the perfect photo, not the grand gesture,
but the ordinary made meaningful. Thomas used to say, "Life happens between chores." I never quite believed him. Now I do. Because in the end, it's not the milestones we miss most, it's the moments that never made it to photographs. The smell of roasted garlic, the sound of someone humming off-key, the way a child's laughter echoes down the hall. These are the threads that hold us together, invisible and indestructible.
My grandson, little Thomas, has started helping me cook. He's only 6, but he takes it very seriously. He insists on stirring the sauce, on checking if the bread has risen enough. He even wears his grandfather's old apron, the one that says, "Kiss the cook," in faded red letters. "Grandpa liked Sundays, right?" he asked me once. "Very much," I said. He nodded solemnly. "Then I'll like them too." That's how it begins, the continuation, not through stories or speeches, but through imitation, through small, loving acts that echo louder than words. When he laughs, I sometimes close my eyes and imagine Thomas laughing with him, not as a ghost, but as legacy, a living thing passed down through gestures, through sound, through warmth. A few months ago, I started writing Thomas letters again. I don't send them anywhere, of course. I keep them in a wooden box under our bed, the same one that holds our wedding photos and the first card he ever gave me. Some are short. The hydrangeas are blooming again. You'd be proud. Others are longer. I finally repainted the living room. Lily says it's too bright, but I think it's cheerful. Maybe it's time this house learned to smile again. Writing to him feels like a way of staying honest, with him and with myself. It reminds me that grief isn't linear. It ebbs, it flows, it surprises you. Sometimes it's heavy, sometimes it's a whisper, but it's always love, just reshaped. There's a saying I once heard: "Silence remembers, but sound forgives." I think that's what Thomas meant when he said to fill the house with noise. Noise forgives the quiet. Noise heals what silence leaves behind. Our house has become noisy again, not chaotic, but alive. The piano Lily insisted on moving here plays softly in the background. The kettle whistles, the baby cries, the neighbors laugh outside. And in all of it, there's a rhythm, the rhythm of life continuing, imperfect and beautiful. It's late now. The last guests have gone. The dishes are done. The table is cleared. The candle flickers low, one of the same pair Thomas and I used on our first dinner here. I sit down, the same spot as always, and pour myself a small glass of wine. Outside, the night hums with distant crickets. I close my eyes and listen. For a moment, I swear I can hear it again, his faint, off-key whistle. And this time, instead of breaking me, it makes me smile. Because I know what he meant now. Love isn't something you hold on to, it's something you practice. Every Sunday, every meal, every breath. The tradition isn't about him anymore, it's about all of us. The living, the gone, the yet to come. It's about remembering that the ordinary is the miracle. I raise my glass to the empty chair. To you, I whisper, and to every Sunday that's still ahead. And in that moment, surrounded by the echoes of laughter, the warmth of memory, and the quiet hum of life still going, I feel it. Not grief, not loss, but peace. The kind that stays.